So imagine walking right into the boardroom of, the most powerful corporation on earth.
Okay, yeah. Like the absolute top tier.
Right, the absolute top. You are looking at the CEO, the board of directors, the people who, supposedly hold the fate of millions in their hands.
The guys in the bespoke suits.
Exactly. The bespoke suits, the massive mahogany table, that giant corner office overlooking the whole city. And suddenly, as you're just standing there, you realize with this, absolute undeniable certainty that they own 0 shares in the company.
Oh, wow. 0.
0. Their names are nowhere on the actual deed to the building. They don't have access to the bank accounts. They don't even own the leather chairs they're sitting on. The entire apparatus of their authority is just, a complete facade.
Right. But the crazy thing is, despite that glaring reality, everyone else in the building is still absolutely terrified of them.
Yeah.
The employees are still bowing to them, asking for promotions, begging for job security. They are completely trapped in this illusion that these individuals hold actual, tangible power over the machinery of the company.
Which is wild when you really think about it.
It is. The employees are essentially manufacturing their own subjugation simply by agreeing to believe in the boardroom's authority.
And that mass hallucination is exactly what we are auditing today. For this deep dive, we're unpacking the socio-economic writings of a scholar named Allama Parvez, and specifically his really radical breakdown of an ancient text, Surah Saba, Ayat 22 through 30.
Yeah, this is a fascinating section.
It really is. And our mission today is to test his core theory, which is basically, what happens if you strip away the mystical theological veneer of these texts and just apply them directly to the power dynamics of your real life.
Right, taking it out of the clouds and putting it on the ground.
Exactly. Because the text throws down a gauntlet. It challenges humanity to run a brutal, uncompromising audit on the powers they bow to daily. It dares you to call on your so-called powers, right? The political elites, the economic titans, the religious authorities, and see what they actually control.
And the result of that audit, at least according to Parvez's reading, is a total systemic collapse of human hierarchy.
A complete collapse.
Yeah. The text states unequivocally that these supposed powers, they do not own a single atom in the heavens or the earth.
Not one atom.
Not an atom. They hold absolutely no share in the system's mechanics. They lend no support to the underlying reality of the universe. And Parvez approaches this not as a spiritual metaphor, which is how it's usually read, but as a literal structural reality.
Right.
He is taking concepts that have been trapped in the realm of theology for, centuries and just dragging them out into the sunlight of political science and economics.
Well, let's ground this for the listener, because if you're listening to this on your commute or maybe while you're making coffee, you might be thinking, okay, ancient texts talking about false idols, that means statues, right? Like golden calves, people worshiping lightning.
Right, exactly. The whole ancient mythology vibe.
Yeah, it feels very detached from modern reality. Usually when people hear the concept of, associating partners with the divine, which is the traditional translation of shirk, they just think of it as a purely spiritual error, like bowing to a wooden block.
But that historical misunderstanding is actually the focal point of Parvez's entire thesis.
How so?
Well, he argues that reducing these verses to just a critique of bowing to wooden statues completely neuters the text's revolutionary intent. A wooden statue doesn't tax you, right?
No, it doesn't.
A river spirit doesn't draft you into a war. Parvez argues this passage is a frontal attack on false power centers in the tangible socio-economic world.
Okay, so it's about real power.
Real power. To understand this, we have to look at how Parvez defines the foundational concept of tawhid, or oneness. He doesn't define it just as, there is only one God in the sky. He defines it structurally.
Structurally. Okay, break that down for me.
Look at the physical universe. Scientists observe the uniformity of nature, right? The laws of thermodynamics, they do not care about your net worth.
Right.
Gravity pulls on a billionaire the exact same way it pulls on a factory worker.
Yeah, the boiling point of water is 100 degrees Celsius, whether you are an emperor or a peasant.
Exactly.
The physical universe operates on a single, unified, objective law. There are no VIP exceptions in physics.
Which means the physical universe is already operating in a state of tawhid. It is a unified system. But Parvez directs our attention to human society. And here, the uniformity just completely vanishes.
It falls apart.
Yeah. People completely abandon the concept of a unified, objective law. Instead, they chop society up and accept fractured, arbitrary, man-made authority. They allow certain humans to write subjective laws that basically elevate themselves and subjugate others.
Now, hold on a second, because I really want to challenge this practical application here.
Sure, go for it.
Because any modern society requires organization, right? I mean, we need managers, we need logistics coordinators, we need a government to pave the roads and maintain the power grid. When you say people accept man-made authority, someone could easily argue that a complex global supply chain simply cannot exist without a hierarchy of decision makers. So are we saying all leadership is a violation of this universal law?
No, and that is a critical distinction to make. Paralyzes addresses that head on. Administering an objective law is fundamentally different from creating arbitrary laws designed to subjugate. Think of an engineer building a bridge. The engineer doesn't invent the laws of physics, right?
Yeah.
They study the objective laws of tension and compression, and they organize labor to align with those unchangeable laws.
Right, the engineer isn't making up gravity.
Exactly. And the engineer isn't demanding the workers worship him either. He is pointing to the blueprint and saying, look, if we don't follow these universal principles, the bridge falls down.
So the engineer is an administrator of the law, not the source of the law.
Correct. But human political and economic elites rarely act merely as engineers. Historically, a shift happens. An elite group, whether secular or religious, claims the exclusive right to dictate the terms of your survival.
Yeah.
They don't say, here is the objective standard of justice, let's align our society to it. They say, I am the source of justice. My arbitrary whims dictate your tax rate, your moral standing, your worth.
Which is a huge leap.
It is. The moment a human being demands unquestioned obedience to their own subjective will, they are claiming to own a share in that boardroom we talked about. They are usurping the position of the universal system.
Which takes us right back to the core tension of the audit. What collapses in your society when you realize the idols and elites you appeal to have zero genuine equity in the universal system?
Yeah.
I mean, if the CEO has no shares and their authority is just a subjective invention, why are we collectively giving away our autonomy to people whose vaults are completely empty?
Well, because the illusion is meticulously maintained over generations. It's not an accident. Paralyzes notes a historical evolution in how this illusion operates.
How so?
In ancient times, humanity suffered under absolute monarchs, right? The king claimed literal divinity, like, I am the sun god.
Right, the pharaoh model.
Exactly. But as society evolved and became slightly more rational, that overt claim stopped working, so the elites adapted. They allowed the concept of the rule of law, but they maintained a monopoly on who gets to write the law.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, and the most insidious version of this, according to the source material, is when this power grab is cloaked in religion.
I really want to dig into that mechanism, because Paralyzes goes incredibly hard on the religious establishment here. It seems easier to spot the illusion when, a secular dictator is just hoarding wealth with a private military. But the religious mechanism is much more psychological.
It is entirely psychological, which actually makes it far more durable. If a politician passes an exploitative tax law, you can identify it as unjust and organize a protest. The friction is visible.
Right.
But consider what happens when a religious authority claims to be the exclusive spokesperson for the universal system. They begin to generate secondary rules, subjective interpretations, and rituals, and they stamp them with the seal of divine mandate.
So you can't argue with it.
Exactly. Challenging those rules is no longer just political dissent, right? It becomes framed as a spiritual crime against the universe itself.
It bypasses human critical thinking entirely. You stop evaluating the law based on whether it creates an equitable society, and you just blindly obey because you're terrified of cosmic punishment?
And that is the ultimate subjugation. Paralyzes views this as the most dangerous form of usurping authority. The text is demanding that you strip all of them. The kings, the billionaires, the high priests of this presumed power. Run the audit. They do not own a single atom of the system's mechanics.
But let's look at human nature here, because even if someone logically understands that the elites don't literally own the universe, people still play the game.
They do.
Right. Why hasn't the illusion shattered globally? If you know the politician is corrupt and you know the billionaire is just a monopolist, why do you still bow? The answer this text provides is fascinating. It's because the elites have convinced the masses that they hold the keys to the back door of the system.
The back door, yes. This shifts us directly into Ayat 23, which tackles the concept of intercession, or what is termed Shafa'at in the original language.
Let's unpack the mechanics of this back door, because human beings are conditioned from birth to believe in back doors. Every bureaucratic system we interact with operates on patronage.
Oh, totally.
Like, If you get a speeding ticket but your uncle is the chief of police, the ticket magically disappears.
Exactly.
Or if a corporation wants a massive government contract and their bid is objectively terrible, they don't improve the bid. They take the mayor out for a steak dinner, they make a campaign donation, and they win the contract. We are culturally wired to believe that objective rules are for the little people, and if you have the right patron, you can bypass the consequences.
And humans took that corrupt bureaucratic model and projected it onto the fabric of the universe itself.
Wow.
Yeah, they constructed an entire economy of patronage. The Operian belief is that you can violate the objective laws of human dignity, you can exploit your workers, you can hoard resources, you can engage in systemic corruption, and you won't actually face the ultimate consequences as long as you have a powerful spiritual or religious patron.
The ultimate VIP bypass.
That is the exact mechanism. The masses believe that a favored saint, a powerful religious leader, or some spiritual VIP will intercede on their behalf. When the time for accountability comes, the patron will step in, whisper in the ear of the ultimate authority, and your slate will be wiped clean.
Let me paint a picture of how insidious this is, because it's like, imagine a massive, corrupt legal system. Everyone knows the top judge is terrifying and supposedly incorruptible. He doesn't take bribes directly.
Right.
But everyone also knows that the judge has a favorite lieutenant. So what do the corrupt citizens do? They don't try to live within the law. They dedicate their entire lives to flattering the lieutenant.
Yep.
They pay the lieutenant. They build monuments to the lieutenant. And in exchange, they get an insurance policy. When their trial inevitably comes up, the lieutenant cashes in his favor with the judge, and the corrupt citizen walks free.
And the text violently rejects that this mechanism exists in the universal order. It states categorically, the system permits no intercession that overrides its laws.
None at all.
None. Permission to act within the system belongs strictly to the objective rules of the order itself. There is no lieutenant whispering in the judge's ear.
Now, Parvez does something really radical here with the translation, doesn't he? He structurally dismantles this whole economy of patronage by going after the word Shafa'at itself.
He does, yeah. For centuries, Shafa'at has been translated to mean this kind of VIP plea bargain. But Parvez traces the word back to its linguistic root and retranslates it within the context of a unified, objective legal system. He argues that in a system of absolute law, Shafa'at simply means Shafa'at.
Meaning objective testimony in a court of law.
Yes. Factual, objective testimony. That completely rewrites the reality of the situation. Intercession doesn't mean a patron begging for your crimes to be ignored. It means someone standing beside you in the court of reality and providing a factual accounting of what you actually did.
Oh, wow.
It is a mechanism of adhering strictly to the system's rules, not a mechanism for bypassing them.
So the fixer doesn't exist. There is no back channel.
The fixer is a hallucination designed to extract your loyalty.
Let me stop you there, because we need to look at the psychological fallout of this. Removing the fixer sounds great on paper, but in practice, doesn't that utterly terrify people?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, think about a person who has spent 50 years hoarding wealth, crushing their competition, and ignoring the welfare of their community. But they've been donating 10% of their income to a local religious institution.
Right. Buying favor.
Yeah. They've been performing all the specific rituals perfectly. They sleep well at night because they assume they've bought an insurance policy for the ultimate reckoning. And suddenly Parvez comes along and says the policy is fake. Your patron has zero leverage. You are going to face the objective law based entirely on the consequences of your own actions. That would cause a complete existential panic.
It causes panic among those who benefit from corruption, yes. But Parvez argues it is incredibly liberating for the marginalized majority of society. We have to ask, what is the actual psychological and economic function of relying on a patron?
What is it?
It is a formalized system of subjugation. You are trading your autonomy, your moral responsibility, and a significant portion of your resources to this elite class in exchange for an illusion of safety.
It's a spiritual protection racket. You are paying the mafia.
And what happens when you eliminate the back channel? The text forces society back onto pure rule of law and individual merit. It strips the elite class of their most potent weapon. Their power comes entirely from their ability to dole out unearned favors.
Right, if they can't do that.
If a religious leader or a political patron cannot promise to save you from the objective consequences of your actions, why on earth would you blindly follow them? Why would you let them dictate your life?
Their leverage drops to zero.
Exactly.
It would be like discovering that the mafia don who has been shaking down your neighborhood for 20 years, actually has no crew, no weapons, and the local police chief has never even heard of him.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Right. The moment the neighborhood realizes the Don has no actual ability to inflict consequences or provide protection, everyone stops paying the protection money instantly.
That is the structural collapse Parwez is pointing to. And he notes that this is exactly why the concept of no intercession is so fiercely resisted by established power structures. The elites desperately need the masses to believe in the back door because the elites are the ones operating the toll booth at the back door.
Ah, the toll booth.
Yeah, if the masses wake up and realize the system is governed entirely by cause and effect, by the uniformity of law, the entire power dynamic of human history has to shift. Merit has to replace patronage. Objective justice has to replace VIP favors.
I see the logic, but I want to understand how the elites pulled this off. Like, how do you convince entire generations to abandon their pursuit of an equitable society and instead focus all their energy on appeasing a patron? The mechanism of that deception is what fascinates me.
To understand the mechanism, Parwez analyzes how the very definition of obedience was subtly manipulated over centuries.
Manipulated how?
Well, the original mandate of the universal system, the Tawhid, was obedience to the objective laws of justice. That means practically structuring your economy so that people aren't starving. It means structuring your legal system so that the rich and the poor face the same consequences. But an objective, equitable society is very hard for elites to control.
Yeah, it leaves no room for a ruling class to hoard wealth.
Right, because if the law is supreme, the king is just a citizen.
So historically, the elites engineered a linguistic and cultural shift. They subtly translated the concept of obedience to a universal law into the concept of ritual worship. Let me make sure I'm tracking this. They took the demand for a just society and shrunk it down into a set of symbolic gestures.
Precisely. The elites essentially told the masses, don't worry about how the economy is structured. Don't worry about the fact that we are writing laws that keep you in debt. Just make sure you perform these specific physical rituals perfectly.
Light the incense at the right time.
Recite the exact words. If you do the rituals, the VIP intercessor will be pleased and your ultimate salvation is secured.
That is the ultimate misdirection. It's a magician's trick on a civilizational scale. The elites have the masses looking at their own hands, making sure their rituals are flawless, while the elites are busy extracting all the labor and resources from the real world.
And Parwez makes a devastating point here. He argues that the moment you reduce the overarching universal order to mere ritual, you have actually committed the core violation the text condemns. You have committed shirk.
Because you've replaced the real law with a fake one.
Exactly. You are allowing human elites to govern your actual tangible life, your economics, your politics, your human rights, while relegating the universal system to a purely symbolic, invisible realm. You have handed the real world over to false idols.
Okay, so the listener is tracking this audit. We've established that the powers we fear own no shares in reality. We've established that the back doors are locked. There is no VIP fixer to save us from the law.
Right.
But the elites aren't stupid.
Okay.
If they can't threaten us with the law and they can't sell us fake insurance policies, they have one final brutal card to play to keep the masses subjugated.
The pantry. The economics of survival?
Exactly. If you can't control people through fear of the afterlife, you control them through fear of starvation today. This brings us to Ayat 24, which shifts the focus of the audit directly to the supply chain.
The text asks a very specific, unavoidable question. Who actually provides from the heavens and the earth? Who is actually sending down the sustenance that keeps humanity alive?
And the unavoidable answer is the overarching universal system itself, the physical mechanics of the earth.
Yep.
But look at how this plays out in modern society. Our political and economic elites love to pose as grand benefactors. A politician will stand at a podium and scream, I created 50,000 jobs. I put food on the table of the working class. I built this economy.
Or a tech billionaire will claim, I am a wealth creator. Without my genius, the masses would be destitute. They frame themselves as the source of human survival.
Which is just wild arrogance.
It is, and Parwez exposes the absolute economic dishonesty of this claim by forcing us to look at the literal physical mechanics of provision. Consider something as fundamental as a single grain of wheat. How does it actually come into existence?
Well, it requires a massive planetary mechanism. The sun has to heat the ocean water evaporates and forms clouds. The atmospheric pressure systems, driven by the Earth's rotation, move those clouds over land. the water falls as rain.
Right.
A seed, which contains a genetic code honed over millions of years of natural selection, is placed in the soil. The soil contains minerals deposited by geological forces over eons. The seed uses the water, the sunlight, and the minerals to synthesize a plant.
Now run the audit. What did the politician contribute to the creation of the sun?
Nothing.
What did the billionaire contribute to the water cycle? Did the religious elite write the genetic code of the wheat seed? Did the CEO manufacture the topsoil?
They contributed absolutely nothing. Zero.
The fundamental resources required for human survival, the energy, the water, the biology, they are provided entirely by the overarching objective system. They are a free gift from the universe, designed to sustain all of humanity. Therefore, what are the elites actually doing?
They are acting as toll booth operators.
That is the perfect analogy.
It's infuriating when you map it out. Imagine a massive, pristine river that has been flowing down a mountain for 10,000 years, providing water to everyone in the valley.
Okay, picture that.
One day, a guy comes along, cuts down some trees, builds a wooden gate across the river, and hires some guys with sticks to guard it. When you walk up with your bucket, he demands you pay him half your harvest for a cup of water.
Right.
And the most insane part is he expects you to thank him. He says, look at the water I am providing for you. You rely on me for your survival. He didn't create the water. He didn't make the river flow. He just leveraged violence and artificial scarcity to monopolize something the universe provided for free.
This is the socio-economic reality Paralyzes is driving at. The elites do not create the wealth of the earth. They merely construct artificial legal and economic frameworks to monopolize it, gatekeep it, and extract labor from the masses who need access to it.
It's a complete racket.
But the ultimate insult, as you pointed out, is the demand for gratitude. They demand political subjugation and psychological subservience in exchange for handing back a tiny fraction of what the universe already provided for everyone.
Let's test that in a modern context. Think about the concept of a company town from the early 20th century, or even modern monopoly capitalism, where a single corporation dominates an entire region's employment.
Oh, absolutely.
If you live in a town where one company owns the factory, owns the housing, and owns the grocery store, you are entirely dependent on them. If they cut your wages, you can't afford the food they sell. If you complain, you lose your house. They hold the keys to your survival.
And in that scenario, they own your political will. Paralyzes argues that recognizing the true source of provision completely delegitimizes this kind of economic dependency. The ultimate political implication of his reading is this. A true system of tawhid, a true recognition of the unified order, requires a society where no human is politically subjugated by another, and crucially, no human is economically dependent on another.
I want you, the listener, to really absorb that.
Yeah.
No human politically subjugated by another, no human economically dependent on another. That is an incredibly high bar for a free society.
It is the only metric of true freedom, because the moment you are economically dependent on someone, the moment they can threaten your access to basic survival, they own your autonomy.
Yeah.
If your ability to feed your family relies on bowing to a specific political patron or keeping quiet about a corrupt corporate practice, you are not free. You are committing that structural violation we discussed at the beginning. You are treating a human being as if they possess the power of the universal system. You are making them a false idol.
Not an idol made of stone or wood, but an idol made of capital, leverage, and monopoly power.
And Paralyzes uses the uniformity of the physical universe to highlight how unnatural this is. Look at how physical provision operates. The sun doesn't only shine on the neighborhoods of the wealthy.
Right.
The rain doesn't check your social credit score before it falls on your crops. The physical provision of the universe is inherently democratic and egalitarian. It is designed for the collective benefit of humanity. Therefore, Paralyzes concludes, any human system that artificially hoards this provision, any system that creates artificial scarcity to maintain a hierarchy of power, is fundamentally at war with the universe itself.
This completely reframes how we view poverty and wealth. In the traditional patronage-based mindset, if you are poor, it's because you didn't please the patron, or the universe is testing you. And if you are rich, it's because you are favored.
Right, it's all moralized.
But under this structural audit, artificial poverty isn't a mystical test. It's the result of human beings hijacking the supply chain. It's theft.
It is systemic theft. By asking, who provides, the text forces the listener to see past the legal fictions of corporate ownership and land deeds and recognize that the foundational wealth of the world belongs to the collective. The elite's claim to be the benefactors of humanity is exposed as the ultimate fraud.
So let's trace where you are. at this exact moment in the audit. We've kicked the doors in on the boardroom. First, we realized the people barking orders at us own zero shares in the mechanics of reality. Their authority is a subjective hallucination.
Yep.
Second, we realized the back door is locked. There is no VIP fixer who can save us from the consequences of our actions. The system operates on objective testimony and rule of law. Third, we just audited the supply chain and realized our leaders don't actually provide our sustenance. They are just toll booth operators taking credit for the rain.
Which means the collective illusion is shattering. The glue that holds the mob mentality together, the fear of the patron, the hope for a backdoor favor, the reliance on the toll booth operator for bread is dissolving.
And when the mob mentality dissolves, what happens? You are suddenly standing entirely alone. Which brings us to the final and perhaps most psychologically terrifying part of this deep dive, Ayat 25.
The text frames the ultimate human divide here. It establishes that you are either operating on the guidance of the objective universal law or you are in clear error.
No middle ground.
There is no murky middle ground where you can hide behind good intentions while participating in a corrupt system. And then the text insists on an uncompromising, radical moral individuation. The verse states literally, "You will not be asked about our crimes, nor will we be asked about yours."
You will not be asked about our crimes. That is a harsh surgical cut. It severs the individual from the group completely.
It is the absolute destruction of collective excuses. Paralyzes zeroes in on this concept of non-transferable accountability. Think about how man-made systems are designed. They are designed to diffuse responsibility to the point where no one is ever truly accountable.
That is the defining feature of modern bureaucracy. It's the classic corporate defense.
Oh, yeah.
A massive corporation poisons a town's water supply to save money. Who goes to jail? Usually no one. The CEO says, "I was relying on the data from the regional manager."
And the regional manager says, "I was operating within the budget set by the board."
Exactly. The engineers say, "We just followed the directives of upper management." Everyone points a finger, the responsibility diffuses into the ether, and the corporation just pays a fine.
Human systems are built to protect the individual by hiding them inside the machinery. The same is true in political and religious mobs. Well, everyone else in my political party was voting for this unjust war, so I just went along to maintain unity.
Or, my religious leader told me this marginalized group was dangerous, so I treated them terribly. It's the leader's fault if he was wrong.
Right. People constantly outsource their moral compass to their groups, their sects, or their leaders.
I want to focus on the psychology of that, because human beings love the safety of a crowd. We are social animals. Standing alone against the momentum of your tribe is incredibly difficult. It requires immense cognitive effort and emotional resilience. Outsourcing your morality is just easier.
It is much easier. The false elites rely on the masses outsourcing their thinking. The elites basically offer a psychological bargain. Don't worry about the complex morality of this foreign policy or the ethics of this economic structure. Navigating that is too stressful. Just trust us.
We have the title.
We have the authority. Follow our lead and we will carry the moral weight.
And the masses accept the bargain. They say, great, I don't have to think critically. If this whole thing turns out to be a disaster, I can just say I was following orders. It's the Nuremberg defense.
And Paralyzes argues that Ayat 25 is designed specifically to annihilate the Nuremberg defense. The universal system does not recognize the diffusion of responsibility. The text is explicit. The leader cannot carry the burden of the follower, and the follower cannot blame the leader to escape consequences.
That's intense.
If you participate in the machinery of exploitation, even if you are at the very bottom rung, just stamping paperwork, just following orders, you are individually accountable for your participation.
Let me test the limits of this, though. What about systemic coercion? What if a person is living under a brutal dictatorship and they are forced to participate in a corrupt system just to feed their family? If the toll booth operator holds a gun to your head, does the system still demand this absolute moral individuation? Doesn't the context of survival matter?
That is a crucial nuance. Paralyzes' reading of an objective system means that context absolutely matters in the final accounting, because objective testimony, Shafa'at, includes the reality of duress. The system recognizes the difference between a victim forced to comply and a willing participant.
Okay, that makes sense.
However, what this verse targets is the excuse of blind followership. It targets the person who actively surrenders their critical thinking, who embraces the ideology of the corrupt system, and who defends the patron because it is socially convenient or profitable. The verse removes the ability to say, I didn't know any better because my leader told me it was right.
So even under duress, you must maintain your internal cognitive independence. You might be forced to pay the toll, but you cannot allow yourself to believe the toll booth operator is a legitimate benefactor. You must remain mentally unsubjugated.
Precisely. You must constantly evaluate your actions against the objective standard. If you know that at the end of the day, you cannot use your sect, your political party, or your boss as a shield, you are forced into a state of hypervigilance. You have to audit every single action you take.
That is the heaviest burden imaginable. It means you are never off the clock morally. You have to actually think for yourself, constantly auditing your own complicity in the systems around you.
It is a heavy burden, but it is also the mechanism of ultimate liberation. True personal freedom means you are the sole author of your actions and the sole inheritor of their consequences. Consider what happens to society if this mindset takes hold.
Everything changes.
If everyone truly believed their accountability was non-transferable, you could not raise an army for an unjust war. The soldiers would refuse to march. You could not get middle management to implement an exploitative corporate policy. The accountants would refuse to cook the books.
Wow.
The entire machinery of institutional corruption would instantly grind to a halt because the individuals would refuse to be cogs in the machine.
The power of the elite evaporates the moment the individual decides to stand alone. The machinery of subjugation literally runs on the fuel of outsourced responsibility. If you stop providing the fuel, the engine dies.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of what Allama Parvaz has accomplished with his reading of these verses. Let's look at the sheer scale of the audit we just walked through.
Let's lay it all out on the table. We started with the structural audit. We realized that the powers we fear and bow to, the kings, the monopolies, the political dynasties, have no genuine equity in the universe. They own nothing. Their authority is a collective hallucination.
Then we ran the legal audit. We discovered that the concept of intercession, the VIP bypass, the favored patron who can save you from the consequences of your own corruption, does not exist. The backdoors are permanently locked. The system operates entirely on objective testimony and merit.
Then we executed the economic audit. We exposed the supply chain. We realized that the benefactors we thank for our survival actually provide nothing. They merely use artificial laws to monopolize the physical resources that the universe freely gave to all of humanity. The toll booths are illegitimate.
And finally, we conducted the psychological audit. We realized that we cannot hide in the crowd. Accountability lands on each of us directly. We severed the root of blind followership and reclaimed our cognitive autonomy.
What Parvaz has done here is synthesize a complete, ground-up socio-economic teardown of illegitimate human authority. He takes this ancient text, which for centuries was read by elites as a mystical prophecy about what happens after you die, and reveals it to be a systematic, devastating blueprint for dismantling corrupt power structures right now. It methodically strips every false authority of its claim.
So we have to ask the final question. If you strip all of that away, the titles, the monopolies, the patrons, the excuses, what is left standing?
The boardroom is empty. The executives are gone.
What remains is only the objective, unchangeable law, the uniformity of nature translated into human morality and justice, and the individual human being standing directly before it in full possession of their autonomy. This is where the overarching theme of the source material, the idea that the truth has come, reaches its climax.
Right.
In Parvaz's reading, the truth isn't a theological doctrine you memorize to get into a spiritual club. The truth is the realization of a specific, tangible kind of society.
A society where the laws apply equally to the architect and the bricklayer. A society where no human being possesses the arbitrary right to command another human being.
And a society where no human being is forced to beg another human being for the resources required to survive. It is the vision of a world based entirely on objective law, mutual human dignity, and merit. A world completely free from patronage, monopolies, and psychological subjugation.
Which means the only reason the current broken system of power continues to function is simply because we agree to participate in it. The powers that be only hold their authority because we collectively hallucinate their leverage. They are the CEO with 0 shares. They only have power because we wake up every morning and decide to keep acting like they do.
The vault is completely empty. They have nothing to offer you that wasn't already yours, and they have no power to protect you from the objective consequences of reality.
So here is the challenge I want to leave you with today. If you're listening to this and you trace the architecture of power in your own world, you realize it relies entirely on a shared illusion. What happens to the architecture of your life tomorrow if you simply stop hallucinating? Audit the authorities in your own daily life. Who actually owns your dependency? Is it a toxic boss who controls your healthcare? Is it a political party that demands your unquestioned loyalty in exchange for cultural protection? Is it a social expectation that forces you to live beyond your means? Is it a religious patronage who claims to hold the keys to your salvation? Run the audit on them. Strip away the impressive titles. Strip away the rituals they demand from you. Strip away their empty promises of backdoor favors. Look at the raw mechanical reality of who is actually providing genuine value in your life and who is just a toll booth operator extracting your autonomy. What happens when you finally realize the people you're so afraid of have an absolutely empty vault?